Okay, then welcome everyone to our today's Diginomics research talk, which we usually do with a person from practice. And today we are very proud that we have Tobias Kölbel here as a speaker. And Tobias is from Bosch Research and is working on blockchain technology and the Internet of Things and the economy of things. And a couple of weeks ago, he told me about one of the projects at Bosch, where Bosch is trying to implement a platform that is actually owned and operated by the individuals or by the business partners that are trading on the platform. And I thought this is a very interesting idea, also from an economic and marketing and game theoretic perspective and so on. And I thought it's a very great idea to have him here for our research talks. And to briefly introduce him, Tobias did his bachelor's degree in engineering and business engineering. He did then a Master of Science in Technology Management at the University of Stuttgart. And currently he is doing his PhD at the Karlsruhe Institute for Technology. And he's also working full-time at Bosch to develop this new tool and to conduct research on that. And I think that's very interesting. And we are very much looking forward to your presentation and what you can tell us about what Bosch is currently researching on. So thanks very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. And also hello, and I think you already could say good evening, everyone. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Hornoff, Professor Hornoff, and the whole Diginomics team for inviting me to speak to you today. And yeah, I'm looking forward to tell you some insights about what we call the decentralized economy of things, and at least how it would look like if we imagine that, and how that could influence the cross-company collaboration. And yeah, I think Professor Hornoff already told you a few things about me already. And because of that, I probably won't go into a personal intro now. But one thing I would like to say in advance, so the project I'm working on, which is called Economy of Things at Bosch, it's a strategic project where we are looking at decentralized technologies in whole. So not only Bitcoin or blockchain and all that stuff that you probably are quite familiar with, but we are also looking on novel technologies like SSI and multi-party computation, which are also very important for the decentralization. And I would even say that they're probably at least as important, when not more important, but we'll get to that later. And yeah, so the rest, I think Professor Hornoff already said in his introduction. So I won't get into that now, so I will just start with the agenda for today. And first of all, I would like to talk about why we should consider decentralization at all. I think there are a few already also in the talk here that simply dismiss the topic of decentralization as hype, and they wonder why we need this so complicated technology stuff in the first place. So I'd like to address that with a few examples. And afterwards, I'd like to briefly explain what the Bosch Economy of Things project is working on, and show you some insight in that. Then I'd like to do some more technical deep dives. The first deep dive will be about self-sovereign identity technology and how that could be used for digital identities in whole. And here it doesn't matter if you talk about people's identity or company identity, like master data or certificates, or even you could do that with things in the IoT. So things in the IoT, if you imagine a machine that also needs an ID in the IoT. So I will talk about that with SSI technology. And the second deep dive will then be about the decentralized marketplaces, what Professor Hornoff already explained to you. So these are my main activities in my PhD, and I will talk about that later. But now let's start with the first topic, the motivation for decentralization. For this purpose, I believe it's also quite important to understand the challenges that companies are currently facing. So as part of the digitalization, one thing is that the dynamics of the innovation and technology are increasing rapidly. So one thing here is that, for example, the development and product life cycles are becoming shorter and shorter. One example, what probably everyone knows, is the smartphone, where there's a new flagship from every country, every company every year. And furthermore, the digitalization also makes accessible perhaps previously inaccessible data. And with these new data, we could enable new business models, and also some main key innovations here are new digital technologies like AI or blockchain that require and promote companies' transformations. And especially if you think about the IoT and the Industry 4.0, where things are already interconnected. So above all these challenges affect a certain amount of change. So above all, the corporate boundaries between the companies tend to blur, and the digital connectedness and the cross-company collaboration between the multiple players in the now globalized supply chains become more and more important. So there's a shift from the classic linear value chain creation to more dynamic business ecosystems where multiple companies are working together. And platforms that create a digital space in which companies can coordinate their activities. And these platforms are or act as some kind of orchestrator of the transaction between the firms. And yeah, probably everyone knows what kind of platforms I'm talking about here. Those are mainly provided players, hyperscalers like Google or Microsoft or Apple. And in the B2C sector, they are already very dominant, and it's hard to imagine our life without them. And it's quite good that they are there because they facilitated a lot of new innovations. But you could almost say that these platforms tend to be already monopolistic, or at least oligopolistic. And this trend is already emerging and recognized by a lot of also politicians. However, in the B2B area, these platforms are not as present as in the B2C sector. But that is also changing in recent years. One example, which I think everyone knows, is RVS, who is trying to interconnect the entire value chain from the supplier to the OEM Volkswagen VW via its industrial cloud. And similarly, Microsoft and BMW have also partnered, I think, for an open manufacturing platform, I think they call it. And in the context of autonomous vehicles, players like Google and Apple are also becoming quite interesting, as they are working on their own cars, self-driving cars. So regarding the B2B world, where a lot of established companies are around, there's one thing which every one of those companies could agree on. So regardless it is an OEM or a supplier, all those established companies fear that they will lose access to their customers in the platform economy. And they already have, or they also have, they want to confront that with their own platforms, their own proprietary platform solutions. But those platform solutions development by those companies are not that successful and cannot show strong network effects. I think Bosch already had to realize that. They also tried to launch a platform, an IoT platform. And accordingly, their temptation or the temptation to rely on hyperscalers, even in the B2B sector, for successfully managing the digital transformation, the digitalization in general, is quite high for those companies. However, the companies need to be aware that this also means giving up some kind of data sovereignty, at least to some certain amount, some certain extent, and that they become dependent on hyperscalers if they solemnly rely on them. So the question here is, do we really want that? And let's say we are not the only ones who recognize such problem. I think there are already some initiatives in politics, like Gaia X or the Automotive Alliance, who are already picking up on this topic. And they go even further. They point out some concrete problems with those tendencies. And they also highlight resulting requirements for, I think they call it an open platform, and a European way of platform economy. And Bosch is also part in these initiatives, these efforts, and tries to actively shape it as well. So our aim is to mainly incorporate some of the findings we have in the Economy of Things project, some things we are working on. We want to bring that also to some of those initiatives. And what we are working on there, I'd like to elaborate now. But the basic motivation we have is that we see that we need more and more collaboration in the context of digitalization. But we also see associated network effects which could lead to platform monopolies, which we already see in the B2C sector. And in a macroeconomic sense, these monopolistic structures are not particularly desirable because they also lead to welfare losses. And that the question that some of you now might have, do we really have those monopolistic structures? Do they really occur? And at least that's what a game theoretic simulation figured out that was conducted by a former colleague of mine here at Bosch, together with researchers from the King's College in London. More specifically, they conducted 1,000 simulation runs in a given market, and they had 3 platform providers orchestrating that market. And they, in the end, they figured out, they had the conclusion that there was already one dominating platform provider, and he had some kind of monopolistic position, regardless of the starting conditions. So they all started at the same starting conditions, and even though there was a monopolistic position at the end. And additionally, they came to the conclusion that platforms add a great value to the platform users in terms of for example, the usability and all that stuff. But the platform provider is the one who benefits the most from the transaction being conducted by the platform users, as they extract some kind of cost sharings from those transactions. I think a prominent example is for example the matchmaking platform Uber, and they extract, I guess, 35% of the transaction between the users, and they also they also gather a lot of data in their data silos, which they also monitorize. And as a result, so that's quite desirable for almost every firm, also in the B2B sector. So everyone in the B2B sector as well wants to be this monopolistic platform provider. But especially in the B2C, in the B2B sector, you see that nobody really wants to be locked in other platforms. So you just have to imagine I don't know, we have a platform like Siemens MindSphere, and Bosch is probably not gonna that extensively use the Siemens MindSphere because they do not want to be locked in on that platform. And vice versa, probably Siemens wouldn't use the Bosch IoT suite or something because of this, the same reasons. And the result here is in the B2B sector that there are some small platforms without the benefit of scaling the network, because they do not have that network effects which we see in the B2C sector. And Michael Bolle, who is the CTO and CDO of Bosch, addressed that deadlock and pointed out the vision of the economy of things. And yeah, that's what I want to explain now. So now I'd like to explain what's behind that vision and tell you something about the project at Bosch. So the basic idea behind the economy of things, how we are pursuing that, is to face hyperscalers not as one company alone, but together with others. So the basis are for us cross-company partnerships, which are founded by two building blocks. First, the first building block, so firstly, we rely on initiatives such as Gaia X to create a common governance structure for the collaboration and to ignite some kind of scale, so to ignite the whole platform. And secondly, we rely on decentralized technologies for the trustworthy and the secure exchange of data or the pure collaboration. And among others, the Bosch Economy of Things project is researching how we could do that and how we could benefit in our daily lives or daily business lives, day-to-day business lives from that. So now I'd like to briefly introduce to you the project in general. So as briefly mentioned, it's a research and innovation project at Bosch Corporate Research, and more precisely, it's called a top project. That only means that the project, or at least the topic the project is working on, is recognized by the top management and for its strategic relevance, and some funds, corporate funds, are available to research on that topic. And the Bosch Economy of Things project was initially launched in 2018 and runs generally until 2022. But our work is far from over and not that matured enough to just end the project. So probably it's going to be continued. So and the extension of the activities for, I don't know, a few years it's really likely. And in the project are working about 30 colleagues who are from a wide range of Bosch divisions. And the goal here, so you see the several divisions over there. The goal here is that our principles that we developed, that they are not only used for one domain, but that they are used across a few domains, or favorably all domains. So whether it's industry, mobility, energy, or the consumer domain where Bosch is already is all present, we want to apply our principles and what we find out about the economy of things everywhere in those domains. And as already said, the initial focus of the project was about blockchain technology. But I think today, everyone in the project would say that blockchain is not the sole solution. So it's not a one-fits-all solution, but blockchain is more a very small part of decentralization. In fact, you need other technologies, like I've already said, SSI or multi-party computation, to really meet every requirements from every business domain. So the requirements differ widely, and to meet all the requirements, we need more than blockchain. We need other decentralization technologies as well. And we also need some kind of new incentive mechanisms, such as tokenomics. They are also quite important if we want to rethink established market mechanisms, and if we want to design markets differently like they are today in the platform economy. And how this work could look like, I want to show you on a few different levels. So we are working on a few different levels on that. On the one hand, we are conducting research about the basic technologies and basic protocols of blockchain, of multi-party computation. So we are basically doing proper research. And on the other hand, we are also taking a look at the different use cases that are existing in the different domains, and try to figure out how the basic technologies could be applied to the specific requirements in those domains. So we are not only looking at technologies, but both the technological and the economic considerations we have already in mind, or always in mind. And furthermore, we also have the collaboration with other companies across the corporate boundaries is also our focus. So we are not focusing on internal solutions for some kind of problems. So we are always looking at problems for cross-company collaboration. So not, if you would say in, I don't know, Industry 4.0 down the MES pyramid, we are just looking at cross-company use cases. And if you're interested in what we are doing in more detail, you can Google Bosch Economy of Things. And if you do that, you could find a research update page. I think it's called Bosch Economy of Things Research Update, where we are regularly posting what we're working on. And I think, yeah, you could just type it in, or we could look at this link over there. So if you're interested, just look there, what we are currently working on. And now I'd like to highlight some focus topics, or I'd like to dig deeper in what we are doing. And broadly speaking, in the Top 90 project, we are focusing on the economy of things. And what we mean with that is that things can autonomously exchange value without human interaction. And to realize that, our focus is on fair marketplaces and open ecosystems instead of monopolistic platforms. And we think that the basis for those ecosystems, we need some kind of, let's call it trust, that connects things, companies and people. So everyone who is working in those ecosystems. And I think the core foundation of the digital trust here is our digital identity. And moving on, I'd like to introduce to you the concept of self-sovereign identity, and as they are the basis for digital identities, and then I'll move on to the marketplaces. Yeah, so let's start with a little deep dive about self-sovereign identities. But first, you probably might have the questions why we need SSI at all. So we already have some kind of digital identities, probably a lot of you are thinking. But to answer that question, I'd like to take a little look in the past. So maybe a few of you could already imagine in the early days of the internet, we had a single password and a separate username on each website or each services we wanted to visit. And that was extremely impractical and not very user-friendly. And that's one of the reasons that today we observe a shift of multiple accounts to just a few accounts. And those few accounts are provided by, I would call them single sign-on providers, such as Apple ID, or if you are probably also know Login with Facebook. And they are providing us with our digital identity. And they have built an ecosystem around identity in which we use many services with just one account. So for example, we are just, we have many services where we want to log in, and as a user, this is extremely convenient. But we have to keep in mind that in the background, we lose control over our digital identity. So we become dependent on individual hyperscalers who are the sole orchestrator of our ID. And they positioning themselves as a, I would call them, control point in a very critical area of our digital identity, which also influences everything which is built upon our digital identity. So if you imagine a digital marketplace, you somehow have to log into that marketplace. So you need a digital identity to log in, and you need that in the B2C area where you want to log in as the person to some kind of marketplace. But if you imagine marketplaces in the B2B area, you also need to some kind of login there. So digital identity is the basis for that. And the single sign-on providers, for them it's a breeze. So it's quite easy for them to also track the user data across multiple applications, as they are providing them for a lot of services. And I think, yeah, few of you, or probably all of you have heard about some kind of data breaches, data leaks. They already say that, or almost every time say that they want to keep your private data private, but yeah, you have a lot of data leaks included there as well. And Forbes calls this very movement and the importance of digital identities for the economy the so-called wallet war, which has already begun between the hyperscalers. So they are all the hyperscalers are trying to provide you with your digital identity. And here's now the question, or I'd like to say the question, or is there anything what we can do to pose this, or are there any alternatives that we have instead of single sign-on providers that are as convenient as they are? So that's a big point. But before I'd like to dig into that, I'd like to give you a quick overview what I would say is behind some kind of digital identity in the first place. So I would say that a digital identity could be almost everything which you also have like an identity document in the analog world. So it could be like your passport, your personal ID card, your bank card. If you think about persons, and in the B2B context, it also could be an employee card or an ID of a machine in the IoT context, or it could also be simply the master data or certificates of a company like the ISO 9001 certificate or something like that. So all of those are digital documents, digital identity documents. And in other words, all those documents are quite sensitive. So those are sensitive documents that I would say should be in your control at all times. So consequently, I would say the question arises: do we really want Apple ID or some other kind of single sign-on provider to be our own one and only identity provider? And I would say, yeah, probably we should find an alternative. And imagine there's a concept that shifts control of your identity back to the users themselves, using an open ecosystem and open standards. And now I'd like to spotlight a concept called SSI that promises just that. So digital data sovereignty and open ecosystems. And first of all, you need to know that in the SSI world, your ID documents are stored in a so-called wallet. You could imagine a wallet like your analog wallet, which you have in your pockets, where you store all your analog documents, like the Personalausweis or all that, or something like that. So just in a digital way. And your digital wallet could be like an app in your phone, like we see it here, or in the business context, it probably would be like an enterprise wallet, which interacts with APIs with some kind of platform or something like that. So you just need to know that your identity documents could be digitally stored in that wallet. And probably here the question arises, how do we or how do our digital documents, digital ID documents, get in our wallet? And to know that, there are basically three roles in the SSI world that you need to know. The first role is the role of the issuer, who is providing us with our digital ID documents. And they are official institutions like the Bundesdruckerei or banks or the company you're working for. And in the middle here, you see, in the middle of the slide here, you see the second role in the SSI world, the role of the holder of the digital identity. And basically, that could be you who is holding your identity documents, or it could be a company or something like that. So that's basically the holder in that system. And the big question here is how could we trust the digital documents that we are holding ourselves? So couldn't they just be forged or something? So there has to be some trust in this digital documents. And the answer how we get this trust is that these documents are issued by the Bundesdruckerei, and they have some kind of security features, like similar to the digital world. So we have those kind of, I would call them Glitzerstreifen. I don't know what the English word for that. So they have some kind of security features in your analog Personalausweis, but you also have them in the digital world. And mainly the feature here are cryptographic methods that could provide you with those digital signatures, the digital trust in your ID document. So your ID documents could be digitally signed with a public key by the Bundesdruckerei, and that could be stored in a decentralized network and could be issued to the holder, who is now holding the digital ID. And both the issuer and the holder have a decentralized identifier, or they could have a decentralized identifier in a decentralized network where everything could be stored, or not everything, but some kind of anchor data could be stored. And so here the concept of SSI is that you're not dependent on a trusted third party who is in the middle and who is controlling the ID, but the ID is digitally or directly issued by the issuers into your wallet, and it could be verified that it's your digital identity. And basically, you're independent from third parties, and that's also why this concept is called self-sovereign identity. So if you've listened carefully, you know that there's one role missing in the SSI world, and that's namely the role of the verifiers. And those verifiers can be institutions of any kind that needs to see a digital documents. So an example would be like I'm holding my my digital ID card and I want to log in on some kind of e-commerce service, or I want to say to a bank that that's me, so I have to verify at the bank or something like that. But let's stick with the e-commerce example. So I want to log in at some kind of website, and the website needs to see my ID document. And if they could simply, so the e-commerce service, the verifier, could simply request my ID from my wallet. They could do that automatically, and we could automatically send some kind of presentation, some kind of proof that we have that document in our wallet. And to check the authenticity of the document, the verifier could cross-check with a decentralized network if the ID, if we really are who we are. So if our decentralized identifier matches the public key, which with we signed the digital document. And that could even be in a encrypted manner. So no one else in the network has to know that this I don't know, our document, our ID document, like also our Personalausweis, was requested by that certain website. And as we see in this picture, the decentralized network is a very important part of the SSI concept. And that's why I'd like to briefly discuss now how such a decentralized network could be set up. And therefore, I'd like to introduce the ID Union project, where the Bosch Economy of Things is a part of, and where myself is also working on and cooperating with others to set up such a decentralized network. And the ID Union project is a publicly funded project and consortium that currently involves about 30 institutions, I guess. I think it's 29 or something like that. And the goal of that project is to jointly establish such a decentralized network, which we have seen is particularly important for the SSI concept. And for this purpose, they both develop a organizational framework in terms of a European cooperative who is in charge of the network, and we also are working on how the network could technologically be implemented. So for the technological implementations, there are currently 12 companies who are operating a so-called node of a decentralized network, where all the attributes that are necessary for the process of SSI, of transacting documents, ID documents between between the roads and in the SSI world, how they or where those attributes could be stored in a distributed manner. And using this as a basis, each company is developing a wide range of use cases. So we have a lot of use cases who could be built upon that kind of network. I'll get into that later. And we are also doing research. Research regarding cybersecurity or the regulation review of GDPR is some kind of network like this, GDPR compliant. And so that's also one thing they are working, or the Economy of Things project is working on. And here you could see the project partners. So the companies or the institutions who are part of the project cover many sectors and a lot of steps in the value chain, and even government agencies like the Bundesamt für Migration und Flüchtlinge or research institutions like the TU Berlin. They are also involved in the consortium work. And another partners are financial institutions or industrial companies such as Bosch. And all those companies are pursuing their own use cases and interests upon this network, this decentralized network. But the basis is the joint work for that decentralized network and the ID Union organization. And the use cases of the individual companies, they could differ massively, both in their sector and also in their focus, as you could see here. So we have a lot of sectors and a lot of different use cases where we are working on. For example, some companies are working at B2C use cases, such as the KYC process at a bank, or some others are researching on connected mobility applications in the automotive sector, and other companies like Bosch are focusing more on the B2B area. For example, we are pursuing some use cases such as the digital exchange of master data and certificates between companies based on that decentralized network, or we have some other use cases like the identification of companies on digital marketplaces, but yeah, we'll get to that later. And if you think about the vision of the economy of things, where things could autonomously exchange value without human interaction, this creates complete possibilities. And now I'd like to introduce one of those possibilities that we see, mainly a decentralized marketplace for on-demand manufacturing. But first of all, I'd like to get what I mean with that. So I'd like to define a decentralized marketplace as some kind of resource sharing paradigm that provides demand-driven access from the consumer side, so the left-hand side here in the picture, to a pool, or you could also call it network, of manufacturing resources and capabilities from the producer side. And the aim of that is to utilize geographically dispersed manufacturing resources in a service-oriented manner. So production capabilities can be offered and requested on a flexible basis and on short notice. And we want to realize that with a shared pool of resources and capabilities via a marketplace, a decentralized marketplace. And this could enable users to offer or acquire manufacturing tasks or production orders on a service basis. And the request for quotations, so the RFQs, could be digitalized. And using marketplace agents, we allow for a high level of automation on such a marketplace. But the question here is, do we really need or like something like this? So on the one hand, for sure, there's definitely a business need. So production capabilities are not fully utilized in a lot of companies. And that's one, on the other hand, something that companies have already seen, or also startups have already recognized this problem. For example, there are companies such as Exomity or Creatize that focus precisely on the on-demand manufacturing scenario I've just described. And they have raised a lot of money, so hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital for that idea, so to pool the manufacturing capabilities via marketplace. And similarly, we observe startups like Cargo Next, or probably you've heard about, I think they're unicorn now, Sender, in the logistics sector, that have specialized on a marketplace and a brokerage service for vacant load space of truck cargo. And as mentioned earlier, hyperscalers are also making moves into the B2B place. And we see a need for action here. So we want to build self-sovereign and self-sovereign and trustworthy alternative marketplaces in the B2B sector. And probably you might wonder here as well, do we really need those alternatives? So this decentralization here. And one thing I would say here is that I've already talked about the monopolistic tendencies, but now I'd like to explain something else, or what the impact would be if we would use a centralized marketplace in the B2B sector. So we from the Bosch Economy of Things project think that there are certain barriers for companies to use a marketplace which is operated by a single, or we could also call it a centralized company. And you could see the barriers here, but I'll get into that now. So what are those barriers? And first of all, you have some kind of information imbalance to the benefit of the platform owner in centralized marketplaces. So the owner has an overview of the supply and the demand side of the market. So he knows the RFQs and he knows the quotes for every RFQ. So the platform owner also knows the price expectations of the consumers and the real prices of the producers, and he knows the delivery reliability of the producers or the quality ratings for the producers from the consumer side. And yeah, overall, you could say that the market participants are transparent for the platform owners. And if you think maybe about the B2C sector again, where Amazon is providing its basic collection via its marketplace, you could also imagine maybe that the producers could become exchangeable based on the knowledge which our platform providers could gain through the metadata analysis or all that stuff. So furthermore, the platform owner could do some transaction price changes without the consent of the users, because the platform users are locked into the platform, because now the platform could become a single point of contact to their customers, for example, or at least some kind of good way to get in contact with the customers. And maybe you could remember from these slides earlier, where I said that in the B2B area that we only see small platforms without large network effects. And we think that this is mainly also because of the barriers companies are facing with centralized marketplaces in the B2B space. So that's why we think we should create some kind of marketplace that acts as some kind of, I would say, pain reliever. And in order to be successful, that marketplace has to establish or has to be functionally as good as those centralized competitors like Xometry. But yet our marketplace must consider and eliminate the barriers I've highlighted here on the left-hand side and the pains associated with that in the B2B area. And I would say, or we from the Bosch Economy of Things project would say that those barriers, if we eliminate them, we could even be more successful and will scale quite fast with our marketplace. And we've developed some kind of pain reliever pill for this purpose, so for eliminating those barriers. And the ingredients of that kind of pain reliever pill are the building blocks I've already mentioned, the organization and the technology side. And how that could be applied, I would like to illustrate to you with 2 examples. So the first example would be how we could probably eliminate the risk of the transaction price changes based on the organizational decentralization. So we would propose that the owner of the decentralized marketplace is a non-profit-like organization, something like that. So the members of that cooperative could be the market participants, and with such an organizational setting, any transaction price change would be subject to approval by the cooperative members. And if it's feasible that, or if it's good for the overall market they could vote for some kind of higher prices, but if not, the prices could be still the same. And the second example I would like to give to you is one of the technology side. So how could we eliminate the risk associated with auction manipulations with decentralized technology? And we would say that that could be eliminated with multi-party computation. And that would be that we would compute the auction mechanisms in a way that even the owner doesn't gain a complete view how it's been done. And the RFQ and the quotes would be submitted to a computer network, a decentralized computer network that is operated by different organizations. And the correct result is also computed in that decentralized manner, and just the result could be forwarded to the participants of the matchmaking. And aside these 2 examples, there are some other building blocks of decentralized marketplaces that are necessary to create them. And the Bosch Economy of Things project is working on a few of those marketplaces. And I would like to explain these now on the next slide. The first building block is the one here on the left-hand side, the digital identities, and I've already mentioned them earlier and explained them earlier. And in the marketplace scenario, that would mean that specifically, that would mean that we could identify companies, but also things in the marketplace without creating a central control point, and would have login effects. And companies in the B2B space especially should be able to port their ID to another marketplace without the risk of losing some kind of consumer association or some kind of data which have there on their marketplace. So the portability is quite important here. And the second building block focuses on the matchmaking between the supply and demand. And you could also describe that, in other words, how companies find each other and how they could communicate and negotiate with each other. And in my opinion, this function of a marketplace is the most complicated function when it comes to decentralization, because here we have to make sure that the privacy of the data is guaranteed, but we also have to make sure that the very complex market mechanisms like auctions must be calculated in a logical, decentralized way rather than by one. And this is cryptographically not impossible, like I've shown with the example of multi-party computation, but it's quite complex. And especially if you think about the user friendliness and the ease of use in digital offerings, every time we have to keep that in mind. So with those technological complexity, we still have to keep that in mind. And yeah, I think we are also working on other functions of the marketplace, such as payments. I think everyone knows that's one of essential function of a marketplace. But considering the running time, I would probably not dig deeper into that because it's quite technological and perhaps a bit complex to understand. But I would rather like to go back to the logical level and address how how one might build such a marketplace. So here in the picture, you could see some kind of framework how we think we could build such a decentralized marketplace together with other companies. And on the bottom level here, different companies could cooperate and combine their resources to develop and operate the technical system of the marketplace without one single company in charge of the network. And you could imagine of that as an organizational framework like GAIA-X or ID Union, which I've already presented, and in which many companies jointly define certain rules of the game, so certain rules of the cooperative, and jointly create a technological infrastructure of the marketplace network. And similarly to ID Union, where we have a lot of nodes, mainly 12, operating the network, here it could also be that the joint cooperative, every member here could operate a node of the decentralized marketplace network. But however, when it comes to the product level or the service level, such as providing computing power for the necessary MPC calculations or something similar, the companies could compete with each other. So they could offer, every company could offer, for example, a computing service for the MPC auctions, and they could compete on that area or that level with each other. And this kind of working together and competing at the same time on different levels, we call in the Bosch Economy of Things project the competition. And in context of the marketplace vision and the principles, the Economy of Things building blocks, which I've briefly described before, could enable efficient deployment of manufacturing resources and capabilities over the marketplace in a decentralized, secure, and encrypted manner. So data could be shared and computed as encrypted data, and the marketplace protocols could be executed independently by a decentralized network, and therefore the business risks associated with login effects or something like that could be avoided. And precisely, we have advantages both for the consumers and the producers alike. So from the consumer side, we, for example, have data sovereignty with those decentralized marketplaces, as consumers decide what data they share and with whom. And on the privacy side, so regarding privacy, consumers don't have their demand profiles visible, so they have more privacy. And we also have temper protections that the market matchmaking algorithms like the rating or the ranking couldn't be manipulated. And from the producer side, we have the market sovereignty. So producers do not depend on platform monopolists, while retaining access to a large group of customers through a consistent network and consistent network effects. And they also have some kind of privacy. So the bits they submit to the networks are not visible for the platform operator. And overall, with that, we would have a level playing field where intermediaries cannot use metadata analysis to gain an unfair information advantage or sell particularly successful products themselves while controlling their customer access. And we are not the only ones who think that those concepts of decentralized marketplaces are interesting. So there are several others who are also thinking about that. However, as I've already mentioned, this can only be achieved working together. So this is also why we are working in numerous publicly funded projects and consortium who also pursue that goal of decentralized marketplaces. And one example is the iBlockchain consortium here in the top, which is a publicly funded project. And there we are working on concepts of those on-demand manufacturing marketplaces I've outlined earlier, and we even implemented in form of a POC. So we're working on those decentralized marketplaces there, for example. But generally speaking, it definitely remains to be said. That's one definitely important point, that the considerations and the visions I've presented here today are in a really still early phase, and especially when it comes to decentralized marketplaces. And accordingly, there are many questions that still needs to be solved. And within my PhD, I'd like to tackle some of them. And now I'd briefly like to outline what kind of questions I want to tackle. So generally speaking, I would like to focus on decentralized marketplaces, and especially the socio-economic aspects in this context. So especially, I want to develop some kind of concepts relevant for academia and evaluate how decentralized marketplaces could be designed and put into practice. And in this context, I do not only want to deal with technological considerations, but I'd also like to address how companies can economically benefit from those decentralized marketplaces. And this includes, on the one hand, for example, why decentralized marketplaces may create a competitive advantage, but also what kind of opportunities there are in terms of new business models based on decentralized marketplaces. And in terms of business models, this also includes the question as to whether classic business models can be successful on decentralized marketplaces, or if we need some new incentive mechanisms provided in the decentralized space, like the tokenomics. And in the course of my research, I'd like to focus on the market engineering approach. So methodologically, I would like to tackle the market engineering approach, as I think this is quite good. It's a quite good way to develop markets and their associated mechanisms. And now I'd like to conclude my presentation. I'd like to now summarize a few points that I would like you to take away from this presentation today. So the first point is that in the digital world, marketplaces are highly successful due to their network effects. And when a critical mass is achieved, lock-in effects are generated that lead to platform monopolies. And marketplaces are arising in the B2B sector as well, and the hyperscalers are positioning themselves accordingly. And instead of establishing competing proprietary marketplaces, I would say that we should combine our forces and create the basis for self-sovereign and trustworthy marketplaces. And it's necessary to prevent information imbalances between the platform operators and the participants on the platform. That's what we think in the Economy of Things project. And the key to doing so is the targeted combination of cooperative organizations with decentralized or distributed technologies. And we think the basis for marketplaces, especially for the onboarding phase, are distributed digital identities, which could be based on self-sovereign identity technology. And additionally, we need some kind of technology for confidential computing, and we should also keep in mind incentive mechanisms like tokenomics, which are often in the DLT space. And the approach we would suggest here from the Bosch Economy of Things project is the so-called co-petition. And this is made up of the three words, cooperate, collaborate, and compete. So companies can cooperate to operate the decentralized platform, the decentralized network, and collaborate on the platform curation. And they could compete in developing their own products based on their decentralized platform. And how something like this could look like, I've briefly outlined using the example of the on-demand manufacturing marketplace. And yeah, that would be the end of my talk today. And I would like to thank you for calling in and your interest in the topic. And I hope the presentation was interesting for you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. But now, of course, you can ask a few questions as well. So we still have a bit of time left for your questions. And if you feel more comfortable asking your question in German, that's also fine for me. So my mother tongue is German as well, so feel free. Thanks from my side. That would be it. And yeah, thank you.